Founded in 2008, RARBG evolved to become a key player in the torrent ecosystem. It shut down unexpectedly on May 31, 2023, marking the end of an era for the piracy community. Founded in 2008, RARBG had built a reputation for providing high-quality torrents of movies, TV shows, music, and software, making it a go-to platform for millions of users worldwide. However, the site's operators announced their closure in a farewell message, citing personal and economic challenges as the primary reasons behind the decision. The message revealed that some team members had passed away due to COVID-19 complications, while others were still suffering from its long-term effects, making it difficult for them to continue working. Additionally, some members were involved in the ongoing war in Europe, further complicating the site's operations. On top of these personal struggles, rising power costs in European data centers and inflation made it financially unsustainable to keep RARBG running. RARBG's shutdown was a major blow to the torrent ecosystem, as it had been one of the most reliable and organized platforms for pirated content. The site was known for its meticulously labeled releases, consistent subtitle support, and high-quality torrents, making it a favorite among users. Despite its closure, an archive of over 267,000 magnet links from RARBG suddenly appeared online, allowing users to access its content even after the site went offline. The shutdown of RARBG follows a trend of major piracy sites disappearing, similar to Kickass Torrents, Torrents.eu, and ExtraTorrent, which were taken down in previous years. While alternative torrent sites like the Pirate Bay, 13, 37X, and YTS remain active, RARBG's absence leaves a significant gap in the piracy landscape. The site didn't only attract millions of monthly visitors from all over the globe, it was also a major release hub, bridging the gap between the scene and the broader pirate public. These high-quality releases, which aside from the early days never included cams, are among the most downloaded in history. RARBG also became known for consistently offering subtitles for most movie and TV show releases. Long before legal streaming services made any serious attempt, RARBG's curation of subtitles helped the deaf enjoy films again, without any of the frustrations associated with mislabeled files and out-of-sync releases. In common with other torrent sites operating publicly, most RARBG users downloaded their files and headed for the hills. For the majority, seeding was either a dirty word, one they'd never heard before, or perhaps didn't understand. Hit-and-run rates of more than 98% showed the scale of the problem, but on RARBG, a lack of public seeders rarely presented a problem. As if by magic, a single seed would often pop up when people needed one most, meaning that incomplete torrents were a rare occurrence. Its shutdown is one of the largest in the history of torrent sites. It's also the first major closure since the 2015-2016 period when Kickass Torrents, and ExtraTorrent all left the scene. Needless to say, there will be plenty of copycats who are eager to take over the RARBG brand. However, the real RARBG is no more. With RARBG's indexes gone and trackers offline, the file-sharing scene may never be the same again. It will continue, of course, but filling that type of gap at scale with the same level of accessible reliability won't be easy to pull off. And then there's the not insignificant loss of RARBG's content indexes. With releases meticulously labeled and then tagged by genre, actor, director, and more, replacing something like that in the public torrent scene would take considerable effort if anyone could summon up the motivation to even try. While RARBG supplied users with .torrent files to download content via BitTorrent clients, the site also offered magnet links, accessible by clicking the magnet-shaped icons next to each release. For those with torrent clients configured to accept magnet links, transfers took place much like regular torrents, largely because magnet links provided by RARBG received help from RARBG's regular BitTorrent trackers. The beauty of magnet links is that the lack of trackers when a site disappears doesn't stop users from downloading content. Furthermore, .torrent files are bulky, unlike magnet links which are easily represented in a line of plain text. In short, regular text files can contain thousands of magnet links in just a few kilobytes. As such, they are easily shared online. On March 2025, Swedish businessman Carl Lundstrom, founder of the telecoms company Rikstelecom and one of the Wasabröd heirs, died in a plane crash. Lundstrom played a pivotal role in the Pirate Bay's rise to fame by supporting the site early on. For his involvement in the site, he was eventually sentenced to 4 months in prison. Carl Lundstrom stepped into his Mooney M20 propeller-driven plane, heading from Zagreb to Zurich in a solo flight. Not long after takeoff, the plane reportedly crashed into a mountain cabin located in the Slovenian Big Pasture Plateau. Lundstrom, who was 64 years old, did not survive. The crash of Lundstrom's plane was picked up by both Slovenian and Swedish media. Born in 1960 as one of the heirs to the Vasabrod Empire, Lundstrom was financially independent at an early age. In addition to an interest in politics, including his involvement in various far-right political organizations, he also developed his business skills with a particular interest in technology. Lundstrom owned the internet providers Rikstelecom AB and Riksport 80, which helped many businesses venture online in the early 2000s. These companies also partnered with smaller players such as PRQ, owned by Pirate Bay founders Fredrik Nage and Gottfried Svartholm. In 2004, Lundstrom met Nage at an exhibition and invited him to work for Rikstelecom. Later that year, Nage informed Lundstrom about one of the new projects he was involved in, a torrent site called the Pirate Bay. The site, which was Swedish only at the time, was growing fast and needed more server power and a good internet connection. Lundstrom was interested in the project and offered to help out, initially providing 2 servers. This was just the start, however, as plans to transform the Pirate Bay into an international file-sharing site would soon require much more computing power. According to a detailed description shared during the Pirate Bay trial, Lundstrom later proposed a formal partnership where he would provide hardware and connectivity in exchange for a significant stake in the business. This formal involvement with the Pirate Bay didn't come to fruition. When changes to Swedish copyright law were announced in 2005, Lundstrom started to have doubts about the project. An initial plan considered relocating the business to Argentina, where the Swedish embassy was asked for input, but that never went through. Rikstelecom's owner reportedly backed out of the planned deal with PRQ or TPB in late 2005, but his company continued to offer services to the file-sharing site, at least for a while. While Lundstrom had taken his hands off the Pirate Bay project, his early involvement made him one of the 4 defendants in the Pirate Bay trial. He was ultimately sentenced to 4 months in prison. Lundstrom's association with right-wing organizations was often the center of attention, for good reasons. The far-right political associations were quite uncomfortable for some involved with the Pirate Bay early on, especially those who leaned far to the left. Yet despite this unease, Lundstrom played a central part in the site's history, perhaps even more than that. Without Lundstrom stepping up, the notorious torrent site might never have broken through to the masses. A couple of decades ago, online piracy was a relative niche pastime enjoyed by relatively few people. Dominated by music and software, consumers were largely grateful for whatever they could get their hands on, supplied by largely nameless individuals with a sharing is caring philosophy. Today, however, the landscape is dramatically different. Many pirates have become discerning consumers, demanding only the highest quality content neatly presented in fault-free or functionally specific packages. Around that, a cult of personality has developed around some of the best-known pirate brands, from distributors such as the Pirate Bay, through to scene groups known only by a series of initials. While the original founders of the Pirate Bay were able to skillfully manage their reputations while being known by millions of pirates, scene groups have taken a different approach. By providing no useful information about themselves, it has mostly been difficult for pirate consumers to interact or even criticize them. However, when other pirates with a fresh outlook have dared to step into the spotlight more recently, the jarring glare of social media has presented a whole new set of problems. For many years, the removal of copy protection from games was the domain of largely faceless groups operating in the shadows of the scene. Unknown to the vast majority of pirates, these collectives have enjoyed a level of security by default. However, in more recent times, the ability to crack, release, and distribute cracked content independently has lured some crackers much closer to the surface. As a result, they have become more accessible to fans and detractors alike, with serious security implications. This led to the demise of Voxy, a Bulgaria-based cracker who rose to fame on sites including Reddit, who reportedly ended his work after being visited by officers from Bulgaria's General Directorate for Combating Organized Crime. According to him, this happened at the behest of Irdeto, the new owner of the infamous Denuvo anti-tamper technology. While this could have happened to anyone, it's hard to imagine that Voxy's significant public profile didn't play a major part in his downfall. But in common with many similar situations over the years, it hasn't prevented others from following a similar path. Case in point, the larger-than-life Denuvo cracker Empress. The piracy scene was thrown into chaos following what are now considered to be historic raids centered on the Sparks group. The action forced an almost complete shutdown of the scene, and since then, pirated copies of Denuvo protected games have mostly run dry. Previously, scene groups such as CODEX, CPY, and Steampunks had kept things humming along, with the earlier assistance of P2P players, including Voxy and Baldman. Now, however, attention is being focused on an individual and potential savior known as EMPRESS, but not without controversy. If you have been using the internet for long enough, then most of you have torrented something at some point, whether it's a game, movie, book, song, or TV show. But just for those who haven't, I'll explain the basics. Almost every modern game has DRM, which publishers deploy to prevent piracy and cheating. But as long as video games have had copy protections, there have been people dedicated to cracking them wide open. Since at least the late 80s, crackers competed to dismantle the software barriers protecting popular contemporary games. It was a hobby, even a sport. Then came Denuvo, an anti-piracy juggernaut first introduced on FIFA 15 in 2014 and licensed and revalidated over 350 million times since. The only surefire way to keep a game healthy and alive relied on a shift in power from publishers to pirates. When you go to a site like the Pirate Bay or Kick-Ass Torrents and click Download Torrent, all you're really getting is a link. Programs like BitTorrent or Wooz are able to open those links and will let you download almost any file, legal or not. But you're not downloading it from a server somewhere, a website, or a single person. You're downloading it from dozens, sometimes thousands of people at the same time all around the world. Those are known as seeders, and while you do that, other people are downloading the file from you. They're leechers. The original distributor of the file created that torrent and submitted it to torrenting websites so that other people could find it. But once they've shared the full file once, they can break off their connection to the torrent. This is known as peer-to-peer file sharing or simply P2P, and it's the primary means of distributing media illegally because it's basically impossible to stop. If a website is hosting episodes of Game of Thrones, you can shut the website down. If a person is sending out files, you can sue them. But no company or corporation, however powerful, can stop a torrent, though many have tried. Sharing a movie or a song is easy. You just distribute the file. It will work no matter who downloads it. But games are different. Since a game is made up of loads of files working in tandem and tangled up in a confusing spiderweb of code, the developer is able to booby-trap the game so that it doesn't work when it's copied. For as long as developers have been doing this, savvy hackers and programmers have been working to undo it. When they do, the developers go back to the drawing board and come up with something smarter. Cassettes were easily duplicated, so the industry invented consoles with more secure cartridges and built-in ROMs that could detect fakes. Pirates reverse engineered the consoles to make their own duplicate consoles, which could run both legitimate and fake copies. So the industry moved to CDs because they had more storage space and could be fitted with new security features. Pirates cracked the CDs. Developers started requiring a game key, so pirates created key generators to fool them. The developers came back with copy detection software, so the pirates cracked the software. The companies started using DRM that forced players to remain connected and logged into the company's servers at all times. Pirates cracked that too. This game of cat and mouse has been going on for decades, steadily growing more complex and inscrutable. The stakes are high. By some estimates, piracy costs tens of billions a year. By other estimates, it costs almost nothing. To the game industry, every pirated game is a lost sale. Pirates in the 80s were glad for what they could get, but modern-day pirates have a tendency to demand everything as standard. But will they go as far as paying for people to crack games? We were soon about to find out. But who are these pirates anyway, you might ask? To answer this, you have to know about the Juarez scene. Pirates tend to work in tightly knit Juarez groups, and these groups are bound together in a secretive, worldwide, decentralized network called the Scene. While the Scene has no leader, it has come to adhere to strict rules and regulations. If a release breaks these rules, other groups will nuke it, meaning flagging it as bad content. From the outside, they may seem like the Robin Hoods of the industry, stealing video games from the rich and distributing them to the poor, but don't let that fool you. Juarez groups are motivated by competition, not generosity. They all want to be the best. The first group to release a cracked game wins. Any cracks to release after that are considered worthless and are subsequently nuked. There's no prize, of course, but in the Scene, prestige is its own reward. In one of their info files, often the only way a group communicates with pirates, the group Skidrow said the following: Keep in mind we do all this because we can and because we like the thrilling excitement of winning over the other competing groups. We absolutely don't do all these releases to please the general user that rather want to spend their cash on updating to the latest hardware and sees the scene releases as a source to play all these games for free. Enjoy playing, and remember, if you like it, support the developer. The group Myth said the same thing. We do this just for fun. We are against any profit or commercialization of piracy. We do not spread any release, others do that. In fact, we buy all our own games with our own hard-earned and worked-for efforts, which is from our own real-life non-scene jobs. As we love game originals, nothing beats a quality original. If you like this game, buy it. We did. The scene comprises thousands of active groups, most flickering in and out of existence within the space of a few months. Some came and dominated for a while, but couldn't adapt to the challenges companies placed before them and inevitably faded into obscurity. Every era of piracy had its big names. Paradox, Reloaded, Skidrow and Razor 1911 are all good examples. The competition was fierce, so no single group held onto the spotlight for long. But everything changed when the industry pulled out its trump card, Denuvo. When content protection mechanisms began to be deployed at scale on video games in the 1980s, no one really cared about the ones that were easily bypassed. The reason was simple. They caused no problems for pirates, so didn't stir up many emotions. On the other hand, the systems that were more difficult stoked irritation among pirates. In short, anti-piracy methods that did their job became the most famous and caused the most annoyance. Until they were circumvented, that is, then everyone laughed in their faces. Until the next uncrackable DRM came along. Jump forward 4 decades, and nothing much has changed, with a notable exception. Easily bypassed anti-piracy systems still get virtually no airtime, but those that do the best job, Denuvo, for example, are spoken about constantly. The big shift, however, is the scale of the vitriol, and in some cases pure malice directed towards largely successful systems like Denuvo. Denuvo is a piece of anti-tamper software developed in Austria and first released in September 2014. At first, pirates saw it as yet another obstacle which would be overcome and set aside. But it gradually became clear that Denuvo was going to be more of a challenge. I'm not remotely intelligent enough to go into exactly what Denuvo does in detail, though these people are. It's difficult to understand because it was designed to be, but the simple version is that it scrambles the code inside the exe file, which is the executable file that boots the game and decrypts it on the fly using information from Denuvo's servers and from your computer. The first time you run the game, it will tailor itself to the nooks and crannies of hardware, which acts kind of like a fingerprint. This way it can detect if it's been copied to a different device or if the exe file has been tampered with. Denuvo is everywhere now, and it kicked old school piracy groups' asses. As an added deterrent, law enforcement has increasingly gone after some of the scene's biggest pirate groups and personalities over the past couple years. As the old guard's activity has dwindled, a new type of DRM breaker has emerged: feverishly dedicated, mission-driven lone wolves. These peer-to-peer crackers see themselves as protecting games from game publishers and will spend any amount of time doing it. It's hard to overstate how big a difference Denuvo made. At a time when games were being cracked less than a day after hitting shelves, this software could keep them out of pirates' hands for literally years. Many people on the scene thought Denuvo was truly impenetrable. That reputation got around, and soon almost every game came with it baked in. There are claims that Denuvo has all sorts of negative effects on games, from slowing load times to taking a toll on hardware. It's also possible that due to the way Denuvo works, once the company stops supporting older games or new hardware becomes too different to old hardware, gamers may be totally unable to play. There's a lot of debate about whether these effects are real, but it's hard to know who to trust because everyone has a narrative to push. Pirates go to great lengths to discredit Denuvo, and corporations work hard to defend it. The Denuvo anti-tamper technology is ultimately to protect the gaming industry and ensure game studios have an ability to continue to invest and build new games. On PC, a large proportion of games, especially the AAA games, tend to be protected for a period of time to protect the monetization of the games being launched, say 6 to 12 months for example. It took 3 months for the first breakthrough. 3DM, a Juarez group from China, successfully breached Denuvo on 1st December 2014. 30 days after it came out, 3DM released Dragon Age Inquisition onto the scene. but major video games made most of their sales within the first month, so that was still a victory for the developers. Games came out in drips and drabs for a while. In all of 2015, only 6 games were cracked. 3DM gradually fell behind their biggest competitor, CPY or Conspiracy. When CPY cracked Metal Gear Solid 5, only 9 days after it hit shelves, there were optimistic whispers that perhaps Denuvo could be defeated after all. But that was a folly. In January 2016, Rise of the Tomb Raider came out, and with it was a new and improved version of Denuvo. Whatever had changed, it was enough to terrify 3DM. Within days of its release, they admitted defeat. Their founder Phoenix said, "The last stage is too difficult. I still believe that this game can be compromised. But according to current trends in the development of encryption technology, in 2 years' time I'm afraid there will be no free games to play in the world." 3DM disappeared from the scene after that. CPY was the only group left with any prospects of taking down Denuvo. They toiled quietly in the background for days. The days became weeks, weeks became months, and the video game piracy community fell into a long, deep hibernation, fueled only by memes and indie games. And then one morning it awoke. Tomb Raider had been cracked. It had taken 193 days, but CPY had done it. After that, the games began to release more regularly, around a week or two apart. Since CPY was the only group capable of breaking Denuvo, they owned the scene in a way no other group ever really had. From August 2016 through to May the next year, almost nothing got cracked without their input. It still took at least a month to crack a single game, but the number of days gradually got smaller and smaller. When Resident Evil Biohazard got cracked within 5 days, the call once again went out that Denuvo had truly been defeated, for sure this time. And the scene and outsiders of the scene have completely dismantled and destroyed them. Far cry from the fear everyone originally had. Every new protection is scary at first, but when it comes down to it, if there are people smart enough to create it, there are people smart enough to reverse engineer it. Over time, CPY started collaborating more with other groups, who themselves picked up the tricks for circumventing Denuvo. Ballman and Steampunks began to dominate between June and October 17. Between them, there were pirated games coming out almost every day. CODEX was there too, first working on collabs and then on their own. From 2018 to 2020, they made up most of the releases, Conspiracy made up the rest. From the day the first computer and video games were published, people have been able to pirate them. In the early days that involved copying cassettes and floppy disks, and today most unauthorized copying takes place over the internet. Over the past decades, a subset of gaming fans have united in scene groups to ensure a steady stream of cracked games, which are those games that have had their protections removed. Dozens of these groups have come and gone, but few managed to rule their niche like CODEX. CODEX was founded in 2014, which makes it a relatively young group. Over the years, however, it took the cracking scene by storm. The group was first to release many prominent game titles and cracked the repeatedly strongest protections, including Denuvo, in record time. Most game publishers feared CODEX, but some smaller developers also saw it as somewhat of a twisted honor when the group cracked their game. Warhorse Studios, the developer behind Kingdom Come Deliverance, famously framed a massive replica of a CODEX NFO, which is proudly on display at its office. Since its inception, more than 7,000 CODEX-branded titles were released, which eventually found their way into the hands of millions of game pirates. However, this prolific stream of releases stopped one day. In the release notes of The Sims 4 My Wedding Stories, CODEX officially announced its retirement. This decision is not the result of arrests or internal struggles. Instead, the group writes that it achieved its goal, while also being critical of the current state of the cracking scene. CODEX wrote that it initially started to compete with Reloaded, the dominant PC games cracking group at the time. However, this competition was only short-lived. CODEX wrote, "It was a fun and sometimes dirty ride with lots of give and take on both sides." But sadly, it did not last very long, and Reloaded started to crumble and slowly fell apart, making the scene less interesting. While the Reloaded tag remained in use, CODEX notes that was done without permission of the real group, and this new version didn't offer much competition either. CODEX further stated, "From the first day they started releasing in the PC section, they have worked hard to shamelessly destroy the reputation of a once iconic group tag, when they really should have closed down years ago after all the spectacular screw-ups they are responsible for." According to the group, it has become more and more common for new groups to resurrect and take over tags of old cracking groups. This helps them to quickly get attention. but it doesn't necessarily mean that their quality is up to par. This imposter-type behavior is reminiscent of the piracy landscape, where brands such as YTS, EasyTV, and ExtraTorrent were hijacked by people who have nothing to do with the original groups or sites. CODEX writes that it no longer sees any serious competition to the quality and variety of releases it produces. They don't limit themselves to Steam and Denuvo, but also cover Origin, Epic, Uplay, Bethesda, Battle.net, and many other platforms. This apparent lack of competition means that they are now the dominant player in the game cracking scene, exactly as they envisioned 8 years ago. As such, it is now time to retire. The group's final message was, "So now, years after reaching our initial goal, we feel that it is time to move on. We thank everyone who accompanied and supported us on our journey. Have a good time. Bye from CODEX." And then there was a woman called EMPRESS who had her own objectives to rise to the top of the scene and make herself known as the Queen. The rise of EMPRESS didn't come as a shock. It was a gradual takeover. Juarez groups were deep underground, only communicating with the outside through text files embellished with ASCII art attached to games. And that was if the public even got their hands on those downloads. Most were uploaded to private servers. If they did get out, it was through repackers, or individuals who helped compress pirated game files for faster downloads. Groups targeted whichever games they pleased, insulating themselves from outside input, to say nothing of requests. And a lot of the time, they didn't update their releases to account for bug fixes or software changes, fating their achievements to obsolescence. Then came Denuvo, which assigns a unique authentication ticket to each copy of a game, a sort of license shaped by all sorts of factors like hardware ID. Because Denuvo integrates with a game's code, you can't just crack it once and call it a day. Each title presents a unique challenge. Denuvo parent company Irdeto compares its DRM to brick-and-mortar stores' anti-theft technology. But for gamers, Denuvo and other DRM represent the renting culture that has come to define digital purchases. Increasingly, publishers ask you to stream media, access it on their platforms, defer to their guidelines for how to use it. To EMPRESS, crushing Denuvo is bigger than playing a video game for free. It's bigger than pirating. She has no idea how gamers tolerate its existence at all. Publishers are telling them what they can and can't do with it, namely, share it with friends or play offline. She thinks it's straight up evil. Video game publishers and ebook sellers and most other digital media hawkers use DRM to retain control over your purchases. DRM crackers work to unlock those bits and bytes to achieve something closer to true ownership. From Red Dead Redemption 2 to Mortal Kombat 11, no one has liberated more high-profile games over the past years than EMPRESS. She first appeared under the name C00005 and had a history working with the popular cracker CODEX. Her first Denuvo cracks under the name EMPRESS came in mid-2017 as part of larger collaborations. One of these, Total War Warhammer 2, involved no less than 6 scene groups plus EMPRESS on top. She worked her way up from 3 collabs in 2017 to 5 in 2018, and a few the next year too, and it wasn't until her solo debut with the cracked version of Planet Zoo that she really made waves. Between October 2020 and July 2021, EMPRESS would reign supreme. Of the 15 major cracks during that period, she was behind 8. Over the past couple of years, cracked Denuvo games have been released under the EMPRESS brand, with early suspicion that they were probably one person. Later, speaking with Torrent Freak, EMPRESS admitted they are one and the same. However, while scene groups maintain cover, EMPRESS was more public than ever, posting to sites like Reddit to converse with fans and those interested in the cracking scene. EMPRESS announced that while they are prepared to keep releasing titles with Denuvo protection bypassed or removed, funding is needed to ensure that the operation can continue. In presentation terms, it looks a bit like a crowdfunding campaign, with rewards offered to donors in exchange for new games releases and even public shoutouts in NFO files. EMPRESS says that funding is needed to keep the releases coming, partly to buy hardware but also to fund day-to-day living. With a step back, it isn't difficult to see the irony of the situation, but do most pirates care? EMPRESS announcement reads, "In order all this to happen, I will need all your support. I will post few coins addresses below and 2 ways to contact me directly. Each of you who donates and contacts me to confirm his donation can receive by his/her request to be added as a contributor in next release's NFO. Larger contributors will receive the privilege to also add 100-character message of their choice that everyone will be able to see in the NFO. Could be even self-promotion. just no BS. The funds I receive will be used for living costs, testing hardware, and buying the games themselves. People can also contribute by gifting me the said games by contacting me on my mail or my Q-Talks, so more of the funds can go towards hardware for testing, Empress explains. This allocation of funds is largely in line with information previously released alongside an Empress cracked version of Soul Calibur 6, which also contained a swipe at a certain anti-piracy outfit described as a garbage and controlling company that tries to take freedom away from consumers. But, as we have heard, taking that control away now appears to come with a price tag, something that wasn't attached to previous cracked releases offered by the scene. That said, the position on the ground has changed dramatically in the past few years, and if the scene is going to be slow in releasing games, this may be the only option. But throwing money into the mix changes the overall equation quite a bit, as this is where irony and ideology go to war. For those who do not support piracy, the cracking of anti-piracy technologies, or are simply pragmatic, there's a generous helping of irony here. The only reason Denuvo exists is because pirates like to obtain games for free. If people always wanted to pay for games, the company itself would cease to exist. Wrapped another way, the best way to kill Denuvo forever is for people to stop pirating games. Given that's not going to happen, Denuvo is currently doing its job of protecting games in the early parts of their release windows. However, the politics and ideology surrounding Denuvo present a unique situation. While plenty of people just want free games and couldn't care less as long as Denuvo is bypassed or cracked, there is a hardcore of fans who see the company as some kind of boogeyman. Hatred runs deep alongside beliefs that the system is anti-consumer and only hurts those who are paying for Denuvo-protected titles bought through official channels, largely through reported poor performance on PCs. For Empress, however, other things are at stake too. Empress told Torrent Freak, "I do what I do not because I want to get rich from doing cracks. I need the money, so I purely focus on my preservation mission. As true ownership of something I loved means everything to me. You can be rich and buy all the games you want, but you can never buy true ownership anymore. Everything is rented licenses that can be taken from you at any given point in time. How can you enjoy something if you know there is even a slight chance of its license expiring 20 years from now? Or do people just like to be slaves?" Given the alignment of Empress's beliefs with that of anti-Denuvo supporters, it may well be that Empress gets the support they need in the long run. According to Empress, the scene is not going to make some miracle comeback following the raids in August. Indeed, the claim is that the scene was already very rotten before those events took place, and that efforts to release a crack for 2 games fell on deaf ears. While scene etiquette dictates that groups and members shouldn't become involved with P2P-based entities and groups, it's an open secret that the directive is flouted all of the time. In the case of Empress, being more directly involved was apparently on the cards earlier this year, but nothing came of it. Empress says that venture with the scene went nowhere. She said, "Not long after my Assassin's Creed release, I was offered to join the scene with great promises. I only accepted because I didn't get enough support from my P2P work to let me continue to invest all my time into DRM research, even though I perfectly knew I will have to suddenly disappear from the public. I spent huge chunks of time researching Denuvo V5, V6, V7, V8, all of its intermediate variants, and I developed all the tools needing to crack them. The problem here is, as turned out, the old men in the scene were only big on talks, but very little on action. Lots of empty promises and little to no care, even though I did 90% of the work in my stay there. I couldn't do any progress on Denuvo at all. And as a result, I became very tired. And you wait for those people to save you, especially after the busts. 95% of the scene is in dead silence. My mistake was leaving you and going with them in promises of fake support, so I am sorry for that." The misconception about the scene never asking for money or support is firstly because they never had any real goal to begin with. They do what they do purely to satisfy their own fake ego of how great they are, and even after 30 years, they still live in that illusion, Empress says. But in reality, they have almost nothing anymore. Most of their real talents left to work for Denuvo and other companies like it, so now all those groups are nothing but former shells of what they once were. It is hollow and rotten. I was honest with them of what my goals were and that I am not interested in any shallow competition. I just needed their support of achieving my dream, nothing more, nothing less. The funny thing is they offered me that support in the first place, but it just never simply happened. Precisely who they are remains unknown. Some people have pointed towards CODEX themselves, alleging that it makes sense because the scene group had been working with people from the P2P scene on various levels for some time, including by granting access to cracks in exchange for contributions towards their own running costs. In this shadowy world, almost anything is possible, but if we've learned nothing else since the raids in August, it's that the dividing lines between the scene and the broader file-sharing community are anything but bright, so plenty of crossovers should be expected. In the meantime, Empress appears set to go it alone, with the financial support of others, of course. But it wasn't just her skill that drew attention, it was the fact that she bucked every trend in the scene. She wasn't part of some secretive group. She was one woman out to declare war against an industry worth tens of billions, and she won, with nothing more than her own intelligence. The normal scene motivations of glory and prestige meant nothing to her, or so she claimed. It was all about saving games. She made the cardinal sin of commenting on the Crackwatch subreddit and did it freely. She posted polls asking what games the community wanted next, called out her competitors, interacted with fans, and shared her often enigmatic philosophical views. And unlike the other groups, she accepted donations. In short, she was everything the scene hated. But they couldn't touch her, none of them could. She was one of the only people in the world capable of breaching Denuvo, so no one could justify any measures against her. And even if the scene tried to nuke her releases, people would download them anyway. Such was her fan following. Groups targeted whichever games they pleased, insulating themselves from outside input, to say nothing of requests. And a lot of the time, they didn't update their releases to account for bug fixes or software changes, fating their achievements to obsolescence. Empress doesn't think they loved video games. They loved themselves and winning. Everything they did was just a way to prove themselves and boost their fake meaningless egos, says Empress. Empress became the closest thing the piracy community had to a celebrity. People loved her. Empress told pirates that if they wanted Denuvo protected games cracked and placed online, they would have to help fund that. While controversial over the past few years, this proposal has been overshadowed by a catastrophic social media-fueled meltdown that culminated in Empress being targeted by the police. Empress burst onto the scene with a plan to crowdfund the cracking of Denuvo titles. Straight off the bat, Empress showed a remarkable lack of concern by confirming what appeared to be sensitive information, including links to CODEX. Since then, Empress has delivered previously Denuvo-protected titles as promised, but somewhat bizarrely, these achievements have been accompanied by masses of superfluous drama. Instead of maintaining a low profile, Empress has become increasingly outspoken, restating connections to CODEX and even Paradox, a group that has existed in some form or another for more than 30 years. Labeling them all as pathetic probably wasn't a great start, but things were only just getting started. Fellow Denuvo crackers, CPY, which had considerable standing in the scene, were branded selfish and ignorant, and then attention turned to repackers, including the world-famous FitGirl, whose work appears to have irritated Empress intensely. The Wired interview with Empress was revealing and bizarre in equal measure. In the interview with Wired, Empress said she had been called to the purpose through dreams. A copy of Dark Souls 2 floated before her, wrapped up in chains made of numbers, and as she focused, she began to see what every number meant universally. Looking deeper still, she entered the zone, which allowed her to see more into everything, and shatter the chains. When asked about her process, Empress said, "By mixing philosophy with coding. It's very complicated. I have a goal that no one else has. I have no need for ego." This is the kind of larger-than-life persona she adopted. In the 7 years since that Dark Souls 2 vision in 2014, Empress had become arguably the most powerful breaker of digital rights management software in the world. She says her pivotal shonen character development moment was turned on in 2011 by Atatri, when online racing game Test Drive Unlimited 2, which she loved, was shut down by the developers. Atari used the DRM software SecuROM, also present in hits like BioShock, Mass Effect, and Spore, to protect Test Drive Unlimited 2 from pirates, but it kept presenting problems for players trying to buy the game on Steam. Empress found a cracked or DRM-disabled version of Test Drive Unlimited 2 thanks to the piracy group Profit. That's when the wheel started turning. She couldn't depend on publishers to preserve games she likes, she realized. They can just drop their support and poof it goes, or, at best, she'd have to wait for someone else to fix DRM-related glitches. The only surefire way to keep a game healthy and alive relied on a shift in power from publishers to pirates. By the time Empress was downloading Test Drive Unlimited 2, game cracking had coalesced into a scene. Of course, There were those who simply couldn't believe Empress was a woman. She had to be a man or even a group of men. To this she said, "To all the gender freaks out there who keep claiming out of their own ass that I am a male, I am so sorry to ruin your fantasy dreams of a trans cracker is false, and yes, I am actually a woman. Next time if you want to speak about your pathetic fetishes, you better look at yourself in the mirror." She would later say, "I am 23 years old and I am beautiful as hell, but I don't care one bit how I look. I care of what I do." I think the main problem is that people fail to see video games as the pinnacle and max potential of art. Empress says that as a child she was a very strange girl who did not like the real world as much as other people seem to. More than the average gamer, she says, she has always taken games seriously, not just as a way to pass the time, but as places to go and be. She loved Tetris on the NES, for when she wanted to go beyond the human limits in terms of response and creativity. She loved Mega Man 1 for philosophical reasons that people do not understand. For more standard reasons, she liked Little Samson and Adventures of Kirby. "I always keep in the zone till I crush their pathetic puzzle prisons," she says. Cracking DRM has taught her that the only real way to view the games industry right now is through the lens of philosophy. Philosophy helps people discern what is valuable, she says. And to discern what is valuable, you must look for higher truths. She says, "The higher truth in gaming is that wanting to preserve something you buy should never be a crime." She cracked Anno 1800, which layered 3 types of protection, Denuvo on top. No one else does this because it requires insane amount of focus, dedication, and endless passion. I was able to achieve this only in several months of research. "It was hell to say the least," she said. The video game piracy community had long been a separate world to the scene. Each understood the existence of the other, but didn't care about their motivations, only their results. Gamers didn't give a crap about the bizarre Juarez industry or its search for clout. As long as cracks came out, that was all that mattered. And vice versa, as far as the scene was concerned, gamers existed only to reinforce that clout. It was a confused but mutually beneficial relationship. So when Empress came along, espousing virtuous anti-corporate goals and beating the big publishers at their own game, the piracy community fell in love. In fact, her releases were sometimes even better than the official versions. Her fan following rapidly grew into an almost cult-like obsession. She was half-jokingly called the messiah of video games. The community became full of her bizarre philosophical exercises, reviews, and even a few diss tracks. The corporations tried to use her fame against her. She announced her releases ahead of time with a lot of fanfare and gave regular updates on her progress. So when news got out that Empress was about to crack Assassin's Creed Odyssey, Ubisoft sabotaged the game so that players couldn't fight 2 of the bosses. Then when the crack released, they removed the bug. Empress's version had to be fixed by other crackers, but they couldn't hold her off forever. The revolution had arrived, and it had found its Robespierre. When the coveted Red Dead Redemption 2 release came out, she was on top of the world. She was spearheading the digital reign of terror. But we all know what happened to Robespierre. The day after his arrest, Robespierre and 21 of his followers were guillotined before a cheering mob in the Place de la Révolution in Paris. That's a little foreshadowing. There is little to no competition in the cracking scene when it comes to that particular DRM, says Overkill Labs, who used to run the gaming piracy-focused Crackwatch subreddit. Overkill Labs says they know of just 3 groups that have broken it, and none with the sense of mission Empress has. Although Overkill Labs can't quite pin down when her rise to fame began, as she keeps her history intentionally opaque, Empress first came on their radar when she shared her crack of Soul Calibur 6 in March 2020. In a September 2020 post titled, "I will need your help moving forward," Empress bragged that she cracked Planet Zoo in 1 week, Total War 3 Kingdoms in 4 days. It was time for her to tackle Denuvo version 9, integrated with Death Stranding and Resident Evil 3. She just needed some Bitcoin. The entire scene rules that accept no money/donations is one of the biggest problems which always push the crackers back instead of forward, says Empress. If you're going to do such insane effort, you wouldn't just do it for and from nothing. A hobbyist couldn't push through, she says, to reach something with a bigger meaning than a quick boost of ego, which is very hollow and can be shattered very easily. On 22nd October 2020, Empress released a liberated Red Dead Redemption 2 along with another cracker who goes by Mr. Goldberg, who wrote an emulator for the game's launcher that allowed the DRM free version to work. It landed on the front page of Reddit with over 23,000 upvotes. It took only 2 days for Empress to crack the RDR2 DRM. and Denuvo is very difficult to crack, says Mr. Goldberg. Never know when someone else might appear out of nowhere, but right now, Empress is the #1 in cracking ability. Empress said she hates Red Dead Redemption 2. She just cracked it for the people. Empress first began to lose followers through her philosophy. She had come to believe she had a totally unique view on the world that no one could even begin to understand. As far as Empress was concerned, she had the perfect and totally correct answer to all philosophical questions. Whether this sense of grandeur had its origin in drugs, or the praise she was getting, or something else, it's hard to say. In her first major philosophy post, she said, "I have always had lots of universal philosophy knowledge inside my soul, and it always opposes the famous philosophers and thinkers' theories, and pretty much everyone else on this planet." Aside from balking at the audacity of using a platform for piracy as her own personal blog, the community was quick to knock her down a peg. This didn't earn her any friends. There were discussions of banning her completely. In order to find a compromise, Empress went and created her own platform with blackjack and hookers. It wasn't too successful, but her most ardent disciples happily made the jump, and most of the piracy community was happy to see the end of her bizarre posts. But the bliss wouldn't last. Empress was shortly suspended, her followers scattered. No one seemed to care much about that. You might remember the part when I said Empress accepted donations. That would become a pretty big part of this. The most important thing to Empress was cracking games, but a girl gotta eat. In other words, fans could pay her to get pirated games faster. Empress knew the value of her work and expected to be compensated for it. She said, "Requiring money to keep working on this cancer is something that is a must, and it's not my choice or anyone else's. The undeniable truth is this life requires this whether we like it or not, because otherwise there is no human capable of just magically producing cracks for the most annoying cancer DRM in this world." The most talented crackers in the scene left and worked for Denuvo for this same reason, and to avoid my fate ending up in any negative way too, I am requesting all of your help to keep struggling and crushing this DRM with every new version they make. In September 2020, she approached the piracy community with a confession. After ending her solo career and joining a more traditional scene group, she was back. The scene was dead, she proclaimed, and they wouldn't be coming to help. In fact, many of the recent Denuvo releases by other groups had been mainly done by Empress. There were even questions of whether the scene was deliberately delaying crack releases because they were being paid off by the industry. Conspiracies ran wild. The scene didn't take this lying down. In the info files of their own releases, they slated Empress's greed and unsavory motivations. In their Crack for Iron Harvest, the group Darksiders had this to say: "As we do this without profit from own pockets, we supply them games, buy them. Empress, you are asking money for piracy. We think that's more rotten than CODEX themselves. We also have our real-life jobs to do, and we would not ever ask money. Shame on you." For starters, piracy's basic principle is free. Also, thing is, you are calling scene toxic just cause we're on one of the biggest groups. We're really chilled and let people do things on their own pace. Most of sceners are a bit angry at the fact that CODEX used or uses money for crackers. Scene don't do that usually. But Empress was always ready with a response. "They must understand I do not care about their crappy competition. We are not talking here about making profit from cracking itself. We are talking about saving the right to preserve your games and own them. Because in current days, no matter how much money you have, you simply cannot buy true ownership anymore. Instead, you have to install 3 launchers and go through several server authorizations in order to play your games. This mission requires extreme dedication and time put into it. So yes, naturally requires financing as well, one way or another. Don't you think I don't hate asking for money, but it's how the things are. They said it themselves, they chill and do nothing because are lazy old bastards who only speak but never do anything. Also, I know about several German groups making money through giving early pre-information to P2P sites, so don't give me that scene morality again. Darksider, you are bottom of the scene with Skidrow, and you know exactly what I am talking about. No one had ever seen anything like it on the scene before. Empress thought she was better than everyone else, and she kind of was, at least as far as cracking was concerned. However, the piracy community started to sour on her over time, partly because of her request for money, and partly because of her weirdly preachy and arrogant philosophical ramblings, which people often felt forced to slog through because they sometimes held hints about future cracks. Plus, some of these philosophical opinions came across as a little transphobic. She was starting to get a reputation as a bit of a nut job who had let the whole thing go to her head. Empress posted her crack of Immortals Phoenix Rising, protected by Denuvo, and released it on December 3rd, 2020. Commenters on Crackwatch, a site that used to track game cracks, went wild, calling her a goddess. A cult of worship has attended her newfound fame. But slowly, over the last day, downloaders realized that Empress had capped the speed. She designed it so nobody could download the game in less than 24 hours. That would prevent repackers from repackaging her cracks for easier downloads and potentially claiming the credit. This didn't go down well with fans, and it wasn't well received by FitGirl either. Empress cracks games, most notably the games that have Denuvo on them. FitGirl repacks cracked games. A repacker takes the cracked game and condenses it so that it can be downloaded faster for people who have not so great internet. Now, what is a repacked game? When a game is labeled as repacked, it means the uploader has shuffled the files around to minimize download times. It tells downloaders that the uploader took the base files, repacked it to lower the file size, then re-uploaded it for everyone to use. Repackers generally have a good relationship with the cracking scene. CODEX, CPY, Dodi, FitGirl, and other repackers were given an early crack at times to create the repacks as soon as possible. FitGirl never stole Empress's cracks. All of the games FitGirl repacked that had been cracked by Empress were of the exact same sort that Dodi, Masquerade, now Chaos Crew, and so on had. FitGirl ceased bothering to repack Empress cracked games after the drama. It is as simple as that. There is a lot of trust within the pirating community when it comes to crackers and repackers. The repackers need to trust that the crack is legitimate and not loaded with malware. FitGirl gave that trust to Empress. After Empress choked the download speed and stated that she wanted credit for everything, FitGirl's own trust in Empress's cracks was lost. So she'll refuse to repack those games on principle. When fans in her community chat began questioning her motivation, Empress had an explanation ready. If not for my plan here, everybody would already be shouting, "FitGirl, you are awesome," singling out the most popular repacker. Empress maintains she doesn't need attention, but at the same time she says everyone just should know who is actually responsible of the cracks, and also to support and donate to the person who did the real work. In response, FitGirl wrote, "As many of you could see, the Immortals Phoenix Rising repack was listed in upcoming repacks list for almost a day already. Why is it still not up? You would never guess. Empress intentionally limited the uploading speed of her seed box to 200 kilobytes per second and feeding the same chunks to the crowd so no one would download the ISO before others. And why did she do it, you ask? The answer is mind-blowing. She hates all repackers for stealing the spotlight from her work. Yes, you've read it right. It's against common logic and piracy ethics," FitGirl added. In response, FitGirl announced a boycott of Empress releases. "I can't allow myself to be a puppet of a person whose main agenda seems to be I am the only Denuvo cracker in the world. Praise me." Well, damn that! I'll let other repackers with less strict principles to deal with her works. The problems mentioned by FitGirl are actually just the tip of a very large iceberg, but surprisingly few issues relate directly to the cracking of games. Somehow the personality and divisive opinions of Empress appear to be fueling the dramas upon which social media often thrives. And as usual, nothing good has come of it. By the next year, Empress introduced a bypass for Battle.net's online verification system. Soon she went as far as to hold cracks hostage. Following one of her regular polls, she said the highest vote choice will not win if I don't receive $500 for it. The people who will vote for the highest demanded game need to cooperate and collect $500 for me to crack the game. This way, it doesn't have to just be one single individual suffering for the entire thing when everyone else gets the game for free later. No money, no crack. Those were the terms. Pirates were stingy at the best of times, that's why they were pirates. But there were no alternatives. It was Empress or nothing. It was a lot cheaper to throw $1 or $2 her way than to buy a game at full price. All that talk of saving video games was starting to ring hollow. The pushback against her was enormous. People pointed out they might still support her so she don't starve to death, but she probably gonna lose respect if her choice of games don't align with that of most people who follow her. But Empress wouldn't be cowed by abuse. Far from backing down, she continued calling out to potential contributors and sponsors and promised that if anyone had a specific game they were desperate to get cracked, a simple payment of $500 would make it happen. This was open to a lot of manipulation. All a company had to do to protect their newest release was pay Empress to focus on something else instead. Empress would try to let her fans decide how they wanted the process of donating to go, but that quickly devolved into chaos, fueled by her detractors. But her supporters gave as good as they got, and the resulting firestorm grew steadily more toxic until it overflowed into every piracy-related space. All the while, she continued preaching her philosophy and attacking anyone who opposed it. There was a great danger looming over Empress's rise to stardom: the law. After all, there was a reason why members of the scene kept a low profile. Companies couldn't touch the torrents, but with just enough information, they could take down the people making them. Other pirates had been apprehended before, and sometimes the plea deal even involved working for Denuvo. It could happen again. Fans urged Empress to be careful. They thought she was sticking her neck out far too much. Empress promised she would be careful, but it wasn't enough. Or so it seemed. Threads discussing Empress descended into chaos, with supporters jostling with detractors over the perceived size of the Empress ego and whether or not some of her philosophical musings are best aired on forums dedicated to cracking or somewhere else far, far away. Either way, these issues have now become irretrievably entwined with her persona, resulting in both hostility and an extremely toxic environment. And according to Empress at least, the ultimate damage had been done. In February 2021, she announced that thanks to her haters and rivals who had leaked her address to the authorities, she had been well and truly nicked. Her message to those who had insulted her was totally not at all bitter. She thought they were all beautiful people who she definitely didn't hate because they had just made a mistake. This was all somewhat rich for a woman who was rapidly developing hints of megalomania and power madness. In a post under her new Reddit handle of Infinity Goddess, Empress told the masses on the Crackwatch subreddit that the worst-case scenario had unfolded. Pointing the finger at FitGirl, fellow repacker Masquerade, and all the beautiful non-toxic community here, Empress said that some people on Reddit had reported both her and her real address to the authorities. Her post reads, "I'm not quite sure how it happened, but even with putting my philosophical side aside, I think I pissed off the entire internet just by trying to control my own crack for 24 hours is actually something I am still not able to believe. In less than an hour, I will be dragged out of my home here with my lawyer. But considering I was caught red-handed while preparing version 2 fix for my Immortals crack, I don't think there will be much of hope against it at all. I must repeat again, thank you a lot, FitGirl, and all her followers who enjoyed insulting and reporting me for the little stupid mistakes I did. There are no perfect person in this world, but I at least try to do something right out of all this." But no one saw it, and instead, they only saw the negatives. Everyone was quick to point out the flaws here. The police generally don't bust down your door, catching you red-handed cracking Denuvo, then call you to tell you they're going to arrest you in an hour, so you have time to write out a long and dramatic letter blaming others for your woes. Other crackers weighed in on the hilarity of the whole thing, especially FitGirl, whom Empress mentioned by name. Some users went straight to mockery. Till date, no one apart from Empress knows for sure whether the above statement is true, partially true, or indeed a complete fabrication. That having been said, it cannot be argued that any of this, including what led to this statement, was good for the game's cracking scene. Even if the authorities aren't involved and Redditors aren't to blame for what is being alleged, this kind of infighting, whoever may have started and or perpetuated it, is the kind of destabilization that companies like Denuvo could only dream of. Apparently, without Denuvo lifting a finger, a major player appears to have been forced out of the game, not by the most secure copy protection system available today, but by a self-perpetuating grassroots clash of personalities with a single pivotal mistake underpinning everything. The fact is that by becoming so accessible and accountable to the masses, games crackers and pirates of all kinds put themselves at risk. Most or indeed all of this slow-motion car wreck could have been avoided if the traditional firewall of crackers distancing themselves from pirate consumers had been maintained. But for now at least, the damage appears to have been done, and who is to blame was irrelevant. The big question is whether the same mistakes will be made again. Given what we've seen thus far, that seemed likely. Because apparently, despite being caught in the act of piracy, Empress would proclaim on her website that the investigation had ended and her lawyer had gotten her off the hook. She was back to cracking. It was a long and grueling prison sentence that went on for over 3 months, but she had survived. But nonetheless, the harrowing experience had reformed Empress into a new woman. She apologized to the people she had offended and promised to start again without hate or conflict. For once, her fans and haters were united. They were all happy to see her back. Whether she had really been arrested or had simply invented the whole thing as an excuse to reinvent herself, they hoped it would be a positive change. She said, "Everyone makes mistakes in their lives. I hope you are doing well after this and everything will be back to normal. Mistakes happen. but it is brave of her that you accepted those mistakes and want to start afresh. You will always have the chance to start afresh, and nobody can take that from you. Now prove that you are the best and have a peaceful relationship with everyone. Thank you for your efforts. Of course, there were those who thought this was yet another stunt. People were starting to question her claims about the scene being dead. Perhaps they said Empress had become a lone wolf because she was kind of antisocial. So, where are we now? Well, the philosophy came back with a vengeance, but it was largely contained to Empress's own subreddit and her website. Her releases, such as Resident Evil Village and Assassin's Creed Valhalla, have helped earn back some goodwill. Unfortunately, this redemption arc would not come to pass. Empress just couldn't keep from stirring drama. Not long after her dramatic return, she went on an odd rant against Indians and announced that she was done being Pirate Jesus. She wanted to be Pirate Pinochet now. This caused a lot of drama. As it turns out, there are quite a few Indians out there, and since a lot of games don't sell in India, they make up a lot of the piracy community. Of course, most people already hated her, and the rest weren't going to change their minds. The only reason she gained any attention was because people wanted games. I wish there was some happy ending to this. But there isn't really. Empress is still doing her thing, and everyone's happy to hand-wave it away as long as she delivers the goods. By 2023, Reddit admins had banned Empress. That same February, she launched a cracked version of Hogwarts Legacy. With the cracked version of Hogwarts Legacy, she also released another piece of content, that being transphobic remarks. She's known to be an extremely hateful person, and the only reason anybody likes her is because she can crack Denuvo. Whilst Empress is bad by moral standards, her stand against Denuvo is respectable. Denuvo is becoming more complex with newer releases. It's expensive to include Denuvo in a game, and it's why only some AAA games have it. I believe it's also subscription-based, which could be why some games remove it after a year, since at that point sales drop, so it doesn't make sense to keep paying for it. Empress gets a kick out of proving that she is the most superior individual in every way, even in instances where it may not be true, and wants to prove it, even despite very few challenging her on that fact when it comes to Denuvo. However, that's not enough for Empress. Being the only Denuvo cracker isn't fulfilling enough. Her almost obsessive need to constantly flex can actually be seen as going hand in hand with their wanting to be recognized as a 23-year-old female. Females, especially of that age, stereotypically don't garner as much respect amongst coders or hackers due to their small presence in the scene. Relatively speaking, Empress knows that. It almost seems as though attention and external approval is the driving force of Empress' work, despite how frequently she spit on her own community. I am almost certainly wrong about at least some of this, due to not having much to go off of. Still, Empress is a very interesting character nonetheless. Downloading a pirated game doesn't cost a penny. However, it does take up digital resources, as some games can be well over 100 gigabytes. This is a problem for people that have bandwidth caps, or those who have limited storage or archive space. Every problem has a solution, of course, especially in a pirate ecosystem where copyright laws are ignored. For pirated games, this solution comes in the form of repacks, which are essentially compressed versions of full games that work just like the real thing. Repacks can be made from legitimately purchased games, but in pirate circles, they come with a crack to remove protection. While there are several active repackers, there's one who has climbed through the ranks like no other. FitGirl got into repacking in 2012, using 7-zip back then. While FitGirl was building a personal home archive, she stumbled upon public repacks released on pirate sites. These were much smaller than the ones she had made, and that's when things got started. Instead of relying on 7-zip, FitGirl became serious about compression and started learning and experimenting. Roughly a week later, the first homebrew repack was ready. At this point, repacking was still strictly for personal use. That was good enough. However, as time went by, FitGirl noticed that some of her own releases were slightly smaller in size than the repacks available in public. This is when things started to shift. FitGirl decided to make the leap from being merely a personal archivist to a publisher of repacks on pirate sites. Being born in Russia, she picked local torrent trackers as a start, and not without success. The first repack was a copy of Geometry Wars 3. The game was losslessly compressed from 250 megabytes down to a very nice 69 megabytes. After this initial release, many more followed. FitGirl continued to experiment and improve her compression skills, sharing the results in public. Today she has repacked close to 2,500 games. On top of that, she has gathered a dedicated group of followers who eagerly await new releases. As they are pirated, these repacked games are available for free. FitGirl does accept donations, but the main motivation appears to be the appreciation from the public and her love for compression. A common misconception among some people is that she also cracks these games, but that is not the case. FitGirl mostly downloads pirated releases from a private tracker. These games are often available on public pirate sites as well. The repacking itself is often pretty straightforward. Some games are done in an hour, while others can take up to a day, mostly depending on the size of the source files. The average repack actually is very basic. Most games out there use either Unity engine or Unreal engine. Both are easily compressed without any special work. FitGirl prides herself on using heavy compression and the best settings. She is also somewhat of a perfectionist who likes a challenge. The more complex a game is, the more fun. That's also when more skill is involved. The passion for compression is obvious, and FitGirl has no plans to stop anytime soon. However, to make things more interesting, she wouldn't mind having some extra competition. Needless to say, the publishers and developers of the games are not happy with repacked releases. They do send takedown notices to some file hosting sites, who then remove releases, but FitGirl hasn't run into any legal trouble directly. That said, these same companies could also learn from the success of repacks. According to FitGirl, publishers could take a lesson or two on effective compression, so customers don't have to waste bandwidth. Her message to publishers is, hire just one person who understands the compression and make your games so they could be easily updated with additional patch files without full data rebuilding. For example, Unreal Engine supports patching natively, but 99% of developers don't use it. They just rebuild the whole game all over again, and then users in Steam download another 50GB update. For now, FitGirl is glad to take up this task. Downloading pirated copies of video games from the internet has been a thing for around 3 decades already, but today's scene stands apart from the earliest days of the web, where games of a few kilobytes once ruled the waves. These days, files reaching tens of gigabytes are not unusual. Even now, not everyone has the bandwidth or time available to dedicate to grabbing these releases. Perhaps unsurprisingly though, people always step in to provide a way. FitGirl releases typically offer everything the average video game pirate needs. Games with protections removed or bypassed, delivered via torrents, in a much smaller file size than the original. With tens of millions of visits per month, FitGirl's torrent index is one of the most popular around and is only growing in popularity. In part, that's due to FitGirl's popularity, but also the quality of their releases. What isn't mentioned often, however, is the sheer number of releases made by what is believed to be a single-person operation. The Amelie report published on FitGirl's site provides a unique insight not only into FitGirl's releases, but what appears to be an almost unhealthy dedication to the art of repacking and releasing. In the month of October 2021 alone, FitGirl repacked an astonishing 157 games, which averages out to about 5 games every single day. An impressive 82% of those repacks, 128 were of new games, while 29 were updated titles. In short and in broad terms, after pirated games are released by the original pirate groups, FitGirl's repacking skills mean that they are redistributed to the masses more quickly and efficiently. When FitGirl obtains releases and goes about the packing processes, plenty of things need to be done. Original ISOs have to be unpacked, analyzed, prepared, and compressed. Importantly, when FitGirl releases are obtained by users, work has to be carried out on that end too. All of the compression has to be reversed on the user's machines, similar to an automated unzipping, and the overall time spent can be significant and heavily dependent on the hardware available. The average repack installation time on a 16-threaded PC with at least 16 GB RAM is 4 minutes 20 seconds, with median timing being even lower, that is only 2 minutes. For slower machines like 4-threaded CPU with 8 GB of RAM, those numbers are 9 and 3 minutes respectively. Also, if users have a laptop rather than a desktop machine, the installation time can be increased by a factor of 2, but that isn't the only bottleneck. If you have an active antivirus, then multiply it by a factor of 1.2 to 2. But if you have an aggressive antivirus, then multiply it by a factor of 2 to 4. While running an antivirus might slow down FitGirl repack game installations, turning off security tools isn't generally advised for the average user. Then again, FitGirl is certainly not the average user, not by a long shot. She is probably the busiest and most productive gaming pirate online today, and as things stand, there are no signs of a slowdown. But in 2024, the ESA, which represents several major gaming companies, shared an updated list of notorious piracy threats with the US government. One of the notable newcomers was FitGirl Repacks, which has been a dominant player in the game piracy landscape for years. Meanwhile, ESA's report no longer mentions malware, cryptocurrencies, or scene release groups, which were previously seen as growing trends. The Entertainment Software Association, or ESA, submitted its latest overview of notorious markets to the Office of the US Trade Representative. These submissions serve as input for the USTR's yearly overview of piracy markets, which helps to shape the US government's global copyright enforcement agenda going forward. The ESA, which represents video game companies including Electronic Arts, Epic Games, Microsoft, Nintendo, Sony, and Ubisoft, hopes that the interests of its members will be taken into account. In the report, the group lists various pirate sites that enable the public to download games for free. FitGirl Repacks site, commonly abbreviated as FitGirl, became a brand in and of itself. At this point, many gamers associate FitGirl's supposed likeness with piracy, instead of the film Amélie, from where her image was originally sourced. Yet despite being active for well over a decade, FitGirl Repacks shows no signs of slowing down. Admittedly, the site's domains have been blocked in several countries, including Italy and Spain. But rights holders have yet to identify the person or people who run the site. According to ESA, FitGirl continues to serve an audience of millions of visitors today. The site doesn't host content directly, but links to pirated content hosted on third-party platforms. According to the ESA, in July 2024, FitGirl Repacks received 22 million visits, offering visitors access to ESA member PC game titles. Internationally, this website has been subject to scrutiny for its failure to comply with takedown notices reporting infringing content. Seeing FitGirl listed as a notorious piracy site comes as no shock. It's more surprising that it was never mentioned in earlier years. The same can be said about Dodi Repacks, another new entry on ESA's list. Dodi Repacks hasn't been around as long as FitGirl and the site doesn't have as much traffic, but ESA notes that it poses a significant threat nonetheless. The site operator is non-responsive to ESA takedown notices and runs a backup version of the site at dodirepacks.download. Both domains utilize a CDN. Other newcomers highlighted by the ESA are cosmocheats.com, a relatively small cheat seller with a few thousand daily visits, and the online marketplace Eldorado GG that sells game accounts and virtual items without permission. ESA's list of notorious pirate sites and services includes other familiar targets such as torrent site 1337x, hosting sites onefeature.com and megayup.net, as well as other dedicated game pirate services. ESA's mention of scene release groups and highly skilled hackers also disappeared from the latest USTR submission. However, according to the group, repackers were part of this category, so this mention might have been replaced by the FitGirl and Dodi listings. The Motion Picture Association has a new global chief of content protection who will lead the ACE Anti-Piracy Coalition. Larissa Knapp joined the MPA after 27 years with the FBI, where she was one of the highest-ranking officials. Instead of leading thousands of agents, Knapp will now front the global fight against piracy. At the FBI, she handled large-scale criminal investigations, leading teams of thousands of investigators. This included many intellectual property and cybersecurity cases. In this new capacity, Knapp aims to work closely with the IPR Center and the National Cyber Forensics and Training Alliance to coordinate strategies in the fight against piracy. Emphasizing that content piracy is a global crime, she advocates for a worldwide coalition that brings together diverse expertise to address the issue effectively. With ACE's extensive international reach, the coalition collaborates with major enforcement agencies such as Interpol, Europol, and the FBI. The close cooperation between these entities strengthens ACE's ability to dismantle piracy networks and bring offenders to justice, highlighting the truly collaborative nature of the effort. In the summer of 2017, several of the world's largest entertainment industry companies teamed up to create a brand new anti-piracy coalition. The Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment, or ACE, aimed to foster collaboration, share knowledge, and leverage the group's combined anti-piracy resources to tackle the global online piracy problem. With dozens of members around the world, including Disney, Netflix, the BBC, beIN, Sony, and others, it lived up to expectations. While piracy has yet to be eradicated, the MPA-led group has claimed several major achievements around the globe. This success is partly the result of planned resource sharing. As the coalition grew, collaborations expanded from the private to the public sector, forging bonds with governments and law enforcement agencies. Rights holders, including many members of ACE, advocate for increased piracy investigations by authorities such as the FBI. However, due to resource constraints, this is not always feasible, which underscores the coalition's significance. ACE frequently collaborates with law enforcement agencies and intends to continue doing so in the future. Beyond targeting pirate sites and services directly, the organization also plays a role in assisting criminal prosecutions. These partnerships are regarded as essential to advancing anti-piracy efforts. ACE works across multiple jurisdictions, each with their own set of laws, which adds a layer of complexity. ACE has been relentless in its pursuit of digital piracy, shutting down numerous illegal streaming services, IPTV providers, and file hosting platforms. One of its most significant operations was Operation 404, which led to the takedown of 606 piracy sites across Latin America and the UK. This massive crackdown targeted illegal streaming platforms distributing copyrighted movies, TV shows, live sports, and music. Operation 404 is one of the largest international anti-piracy campaigns launched by Brazil's Ministry of Justice and Public Security in 2019. Named after the infamous 404 error, which signals an unavailable web page, the operation aims to shut down piracy websites, IPTV services, and illegal streaming apps. Over multiple phases, Operation 404 has blocked thousands of domains, removed hundreds of infringing apps, and executed search warrants across Brazil, Argentina, the US, and the UK. Operation 404 has been a massive international effort, with collaboration from law enforcement agencies, government bodies, and industry organizations worldwide. Some of the key partners involved include United States Department of Justice, City of London Police Intellectual Property Crime Unit, UK Intellectual Property Office, Interpol and Europol, Argentina's Public Ministry, Peruvian anti-piracy group Indicopy, Brazil's Civil Police Forces, Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment, Motion Picture Association Latin America, International Federation of the Phonographic Industry, US Patents and Trademarks Office, Brazilian Pay TV Telecom Association, Latin American Anti-Piracy Group Alianza, Premier League, which targets sports piracy, Brazil's National Council for Combating Piracy and Crimes Against Intellectual Property and Entertainment Software Alliance, and Brazilian anti-piracy body APDIF2. These organizations have worked together to execute search warrants, block piracy websites, remove infringing apps, and de-index illegal content from search engines. The operation has expanded beyond Brazil, impacting piracy networks in Argentina, Peru, the UK, and the US. Operation 404 has had 6 waves so far, with Operation 404.6 announced in November 2023. Each wave has targeted piracy websites, IPTV services, and illegal streaming apps, with authorities executing search warrants and blocking hundreds of domains. The 5th wave, launched in March 2023, resulted in 200 illegal streaming and gaming sites being blocked, along with 128 domains and 63 music apps. The operation continues to expand, with international collaboration from Interpol, Europol, ACE, the FBI, and other enforcement agencies. The latest phase, Operation 404.7, targeted 675 illegal websites and 14 apps, leading to 5 arrests and the seizure of electronic devices used for piracy. Authorities also de-indexed pirated content from search engines and removed social media profiles promoting piracy. The operation has expanded to combat piracy in emerging digital spaces, including the metaverse. ACE also played a key role in dismantling Up2Box and Up2Stream, 2 notorious piracy hosts that had amassed 1.5 billion visits over 3 years. These platforms generated revenue through advertising and premium subscriptions, making them a lucrative piracy operation. In another major enforcement action, ACE collaborated with Interpol, Europol, and the FBI to shut down a sports piracy ring involving 138 domains, disrupting illegal live streaming services worldwide. The coalition also took down Digital TV, an IPTV piracy service in Argentina with 85,000 customers, offering thousands of movies, TV shows, and live sports channels. Additionally, ACE targeted extremecodes.com, a company that provided software enabling cybercriminals to operate IPTV services, affecting over 50 million customers globally. Ace's crackdown extended beyond streaming platforms to piracy apps and file-sharing services. It issued DMCA subpoenas to uncover the identities of operators behind Magis TV, TV Express, My Family Cinema, and Brazil TV, all of which were involved in unauthorized content distribution. The coalition also targeted AnyWatchTV.tu, ZoroxTV.tu, and SoapToday.tu, which had been offering free access to copyrighted movies and anime. In March 2024, Ace took action against Magis TV, a long-running IPTV piracy service, along with ZoroxTV.tu, which had recently rebranded after its previous domain was suspended. The crackdown continued into April 2025, with the shutdown of SoapToday.tu and AnyWatchTV.tu, both notorious for offering free access to copyrighted movies and anime. Earlier in 2024, Ace dismantled the F-Movies network, a high-traffic piracy site, and forced the closure of AnimeFlix and La Rosa, an Egyptian piracy platform. Additionally, AnimePhoenix and Braflix voluntarily shut down after facing legal pressure. In August 2024, F-Movies piracy ring was shut down by Vietnamese government, assisted by Ace. One of Ace's biggest operations occurred in December 2024, when it seized 138 domains linked to a massive sports piracy ring, disrupting illegal live streaming services. These enforcement actions highlight Ace's ongoing efforts to combat piracy, often in collaboration with law enforcement agencies like Interpol, Europol, and the FBI. Despite these shutdowns, piracy remains an evolving challenge, with new sites frequently emerging to replace those taken down. Ace continues to monitor, investigate, and enforce actions against piracy worldwide, working closely with law enforcement agencies to protect the entertainment industry. The Evo Release Group, a notorious piracy network, was shut down by Portuguese authorities on April 4, 2023. The Judiciary Police, in collaboration with the Public Prosecutor's Office and international agencies like the FBI, dismantled the group after an extensive investigation that began in 2022. During the operation, home searches were conducted, computer equipment was seized, and 3 individuals were arrested, including the alleged leader of the group. The court imposed restrictions on the defendants, including bans on accessing certain websites, acquiring new computer equipment, and contacting each other. Portugal's Polícia Judiciária and Cybercrime Unit, UNCUT, confirmed responsibility for the arrest of the alleged leader of piracy release group Evo. The enforcement action followed a months-long investigation triggered by a complaint from Amazon, Disney, Netflix, and other key movie industry players. Evo, short for Evolution, was a high-profile P2P group whose activities stood out in recent years. The group released a steady stream of new movie and TV show titles and gained pirates' admiration by leaking many screeners way ahead of their official premieres. For several years in a row, Evo opened the screener season by releasing leaked copies of upcoming films. This included Oscar contenders, but also several Netflix titles that originated from festival screenings. Evo was also the first to release an early Blu-ray copy of Spider-Man No Way Home and a high-quality copy of the blockbuster Dune in 2021 ahead of its official US premiere. The criminal investigation into Evo started following a complaint from Disney Enterprises, Paramount Pictures, Universal City Studios, Columbia Pictures, Warner Bros., Netflix, and Amazon. These are all members of the Motion Picture Association and related anti-piracy coalition ACE. Polícia Judiciária reported that Evo's movie and TV show leaks caused significant losses, exceeding 1 million euros. The group operated internationally, but its home base was in Portugal. After documenting how the group operated, several home searches were carried out in Portugal. The authorities also located Evo's servers in the United States. These were taken down with help from the FBI. In Portugal, house searches were carried out and various computer equipment was seized. 3 defendants were held under suspicion of belonging to the group. The authorities used these initial investigations to pinpoint the alleged leader of Evo, who was arrested and had his house searched in Portugal. According to the press release, the criminal charges include unauthorized access to the victim's servers, computer fraud, money laundering, tax fraud, copyright infringement, and taking part in a criminal organization. The first interrogation of the main suspect was concluded earlier and Evo's alleged leader was subjected to restrictive measures. Among other things, he is not allowed to communicate with the other defendants or use any computer equipment. After Evo disappeared, another prominent release group called IFT also went quiet. Whether this is connected to the EVO prosecution remains unknown for now, but on 6 April 2024, high-quality pirated copies of Dune Part 2 leaked on pirate sites, beating the movie's official digital debut. The release was labeled WebDL, which indicates that the file was downloaded from an online source, but which one is currently unknown. Needless to say, the high-quality leak of Dune Part 2 drew lots of visitors to pirate sites. Its WebDL tag suggests a lossless rip from an online streaming source. The early leak came with another noteworthy angle, the inclusion of In Memory of Evo in its file name. This refers to the release group Evo, which was busted in 2021 by the Portuguese police, partly acting on intelligence gathered by the Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment. This tribute to Evo as part of the Dune leak likely isn't a coincidence either, because Evo was the group that leaked a copy of Dune Part 1 before its official release. Not long after, the group disappeared off the radar. The Evo bust was a pivotal moment for piracy release groups. It marked the end of more than 2 decades of steady screener leaks, in which Evo played a central role in more recent years. The recent Dune leak is no screener, of course, but it's certainly a high-profile release that will be watched closely by pirates and Hollywood. With ongoing talks about a third Dune installment, this may not be the final part of this saga either. In January 2025, the United States Trade Representative published its annual out-of-cycle review of notorious markets. The non-exhaustive list includes dozens of sites and services linked to piracy or counterfeiting activity. The report was largely based on input from copyright industry groups, including the RRAA and MPA. Platforms detailed in recommendations filed late last year are meant to serve as prominent and illustrative examples without the USTR drawing any legal conclusions. The review acknowledges that rights holders described a complex piracy ecosystem, one that goes beyond traditional websites, with technology companies and services also playing a role. Those include domain registries and registrars, search engines, reverse proxies, payment processors, and hosting companies. Many third-party intermediaries were nominated in last year's submissions, but despite the mentions, the USTR hasn't included many in its final overview. This will be welcomed by the I2 coalition, which previously cautioned against blurring the piracy lines. Overall, the latest list includes many familiar names, some of which have been listed for well over a decade. The Pirate Bay makes an expected appearance alongside fellow torrent sites 1337X, Torrent Galaxy, Root Tracker, and YTS. The listed torrent sites are identical to those listed in last year's report. The same applies to cyberlockers, which include Kraken Files and RapidGator. The mentioned publishing sites, LibGen and Sci-Hub, didn't change either. The e-commerce platforms also remain completely unchanged in the latest report. While the USTR sees some positive developments in this industry, Baidu Wangpan, DHgate, Pinduoduo, Shopee, and others remain listed. There are some shakeups in the video game scene, however, with FitGirl, Repacks, and Unknown Cheats as new additions. Both sites were flagged by the Entertainment Software Association on October 2024. There's also a new stream ripper, Y2Mate, thanks to a nomination by the RIAA. The site replaces ssyoutube.com, which was taken off the list. The list of newcomers is completed by hosting provider Virtual Systems and 2 streaming services, Magis TV and HeyAnime. The latter replaces AniWatch, which was taken down following the demise of the F-Movies piracy ring last summer. The F-Movies case is mentioned in detail by the USTR, described as one of the major piracy successes in 2024. This takedown was carried out by Vietnamese authorities, with key input from US rights holders and authorities. The Hanoi police collaborated with US Homeland Security Investigations, the US Department of Justice, International Computer Hacking and Intellectual Property Program, and the Alliance for Creativity and Entertainment to shut down the site F-Movies and associated piracy sites in July and August 2024. In March 2025, Interpol published its latest Serious and Organized Crime Threat Assessment. The report provides a detailed overview of the threats posed by serious and organized crime in Europe and includes a section dedicated to digital content piracy. Interpol is no stranger to piracy and online copyright infringement. The EU agency has led and assisted in many enforcement efforts over the years and has been particularly active in dismantling criminal IPTV operations across several member states. The 100-page SOCTA report touches on a wide array of crime threats, but with less than a full page, the piracy assessment is rather concise. Europol notes that pirated digital content is mostly consumed via mobile and web-based applications, driven by increased online streaming and over-the-top services. The report goes on to mention that online piracy and other types of cybercrime increasingly overlap. This can include theft of credentials from legitimate streaming service subscribers, which can then be repackaged and offered to pirates. Digital pirates may steal or purchase login credentials from legitimate subscribers, often sourced via phishing scams or data breaches, and then repackage multiple over-the-top libraries into a single, unauthorized service. Europol's overview of the piracy landscape and associated threats doesn't offer much detail or highlight any novel or emerging threats. Alright, let's wrap this up. The rise of Denuvo, piracy, crackers, and the scene is a fascinating ongoing battle between game developers and the people who push against corporate control. What started as a secretive, underground effort has evolved into something more public, more controversial, and more chaotic than ever before. Today, lone wolves like Empress have taken the fight into their own hands, stepping into the spotlight and redefining what it means to crack DRM. But with this shift from anonymity to visibility comes a new set of risks. Law enforcement is cracking down harder, and some of the most legendary groups have vanished completely. At its core, this struggle isn't just about piracy, it's about control. Game publishers want absolute power over how you access and experience their games, while crackers believe in true ownership, the ability to use what you've purchased freely without restrictions. And that's where the moral debate gets messy. Some see piracy as a necessary act of rebellion against companies that are becoming increasingly restrictive. Others believe it's nothing more than theft. But regardless of where you stand, one thing is clear: this war isn't over. With every new protection method, crackers find a way to break it. And as gaming evolves, so will the tactics used by both sides. Whether that's through tougher DRM, more extreme punishments, or an entirely new way of distributing games, we're standing on the edge of a new era. So what do you think? Is piracy justified when game publishers lock players behind digital walls? Or do you believe the fight against Denuvo is just feeding into a never-ending cycle? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you think. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got plenty more deep dives coming your way.